morning and a warm welcome to all for the third in the series of medico-legal issues in daily practice, the webinar series where we have the speaker, Dr. Tushar Roy. Thank you very much to IMA South Delhi Branch for arranging this series, and thanks a lot to Dr. Chanchal, the President, and Honorary Secretary, Dr. G.S. Grewal. Now I hand over to Dr. Chanchal to initiate the session.
Thank you, Dr. Deepika. Good morning, dear friends and colleagues. Thanks for joining early in the morning on a Sunday. And rightly so, because we are discussing on very important issues in this series of medical legal cases or issues in day-to-day practice. And we started on 20th of November, and we have already had two very successful webinar on that. And first one was on teleconsultation do's and don'ts, and we had taken very important points from that. And now we had our series on last time on abuse on doctors or assault and how to prevent that, and if it happens, how to handle and what law says. Dr. Tushar Roy, who is the speaker, had elaborated points very well. And this time we are talking about prescription writing. Since we entered medical college, we had been writing a lot, and with the result, we had become careless writers. So much has to be written that our handwritings had become spoiled. We write in hurry. We write when the patient's attendants are talking to us or discussing on side by side, not concentrating. Sometimes we cut. Sometimes we don't bother much, though knowing very well this is a very, very important document. And now, since medico-legal issues, legal hassles are coming, we should be very careful to handle this document. So from Dr. Tushar Roy, today we learn that what should be done in our prescription writing so that we don't fall prey to legal hassles. As you all know, Dr. Tushar Roy is very well known cardiologist in National Heart Institute of Delhi. He had done his MD from Maulana Azad Medical College and DM from PGI Chandigarh, and then his MRCP from Edinburgh, and then he did his law from Merit University. So we have packaged 2-in-1 here who can give us legal advice along with the full knowledge of what we face from day to day. So with these words, I'll definitely welcome Dr. Tushar Roy. Just 2 points to take. Kindly put your questions in the chat box so that we can discuss at the end of the session. You can also see this on this session on Facebook page, recorded version of earlier ones also, and this one also, which is streaming live on Facebook. And next session, as Dr. Tushar Roy is a very popular speaker now, so we requested him to talk about the consent taking, which will happen on the next Sunday, and we'll inform you soon. With this word, I welcome you, all of you, and our eminent speaker, Dr. Tushar Roy. Dr. Tushar Roy, please.
Thank you, Dr. Chanchal Pal. Dear friends, good morning. So there are certain maxims in medicine and there are certain, next slide, and there are certain maxims in law also. And one of the first things that we need to understand in law is this maxim, which is ignorantia juris non excusat. Very simply, this is in Latin. It means ignorance of the law is no excuse. That means you cannot stand up in any forum, whether it is a committee or the court or the council, and say, sir, I genuinely did not know this. It is correct that maybe you did not know that, but that cannot be an excuse. You will not be excused by saying or by not knowing something, because then that would be the refrain that would be taken by everybody. Sir, I did not know. Then it would be impossible to do the law. So even if you know or even if you don't know, next slide please, you are covered by so many laws. Indian Medical Degrees Act, Indian Medical Council Act. But for us, what is important is the ethics regulation. So it's called the Indian Medical Council Professional Conduct, Etiquette and Ethics Regulation 2002, which is upgraded, they call it amended from time to time. And I really suggest that you should go to the site of the Medical Council of India and download, or the National Medical Council now it is called, and download this and read it on a yearly basis. Normally, laws are written in very complicated language. Sometimes it is difficult to understand, but this particular regulation is in simple, normal, day-to-day English, and it is something that regulates our practice day to day. And I strongly suggest that you go and you download it and keep it in your clinic and at least read it once a year. Next slide, please. There are several documents that the doctor is responsible for. First among them is, of course, the prescription, then the inpatient records, the discharge death summaries, patient reports and investigations, medical certificates, death certificates, disability certificates, fitness certificates. So there are so many things that the doctor is responsible for, or creates these certificates. Next slide, please. Regarding prescription, which is our talk today, it's very important to understand that when everything is okay, everything is fine, but when the dispute occurs, then often the patient sometimes selectively present prescription. That means they will present prescription 1 and 3, but may not present prescription 2. Because in prescription 2, you have written the investigations, and he says, that's up to investigation karaya nahi. And the law says, and the doctor will say, yes, I have given one prescription, where is prescription number 2? And the patient says that I don't have, you never gave me prescription number 2. So what does the law say? The law says that the person, that is the Indian Evidence Act, says that the person who claims has to produce the evidence. Who is the claimant here? The claimant is the doctor. The doctor is saying, I gave you prescription. So it is the doctor that must present the prescription. The patient may or may not produce the prescription. So this problem of selective presentation of prescription, that means presenting prescription 1 and 3 and not prescription 2, or non-presentation of prescriptions are not presented at all. This is the thing that you gave me, this slip of paper is all that you gave me. So that's an important thing. So why prescriptions must be kept as a record on the side of the doctor is what I'm trying to get at. The next thing is that every single thing that the doctor writes is by default taken to be a prescription. So if you write, for example, acquisition, you ask that get these two capsules and bring them to me, and you write it on a piece of paper, and that is construed as a prescription. The patient may say that this is all that you've written, you've not given me anything else. So be careful about what you write, because every single thing that you write is by default taken as a prescription, as a full prescription. So if it's a requisition slip, do write requisition slip. If it's a duplicate, do write duplicate. Do write investigation. If it's only the investigations, write investigation advice, discharge advice, and discharge summary. Discharge advice and discharge summary are two entirely different things. Discharge summary is the full summary, but discharge advice is the short thing that you write at the time when the patient goes home. Because the discharge summary may be 24 hours, he may get it 24 hours later. So by the time he gets the discharge summary, you write the gist of the medication that is to be taken. So you write on top that this is the discharge advice. What I'm trying to say is that do label your writing correctly, whatever you've written correctly, so that everything is not construed as a full and final prescription. Next slide, please. Here are two things I want to discuss. Again, this is from these numbers are from the Ethics Regulation 2002 as upgraded, as an amended. And the first thing is misconduct. So what is misconduct? Misconduct is the following acts of commission or omission, that is not doing something that you're supposed to do, or doing something which you're not supposed to do. So commission and omission on the part of the physician shall constitute professional misconduct, rendering him or her liable for disciplinary action. That means if you do misconduct, that is you do something which you're not supposed to do, or you don't do something which you're supposed to do, then that can be construed as misconduct, and disciplinary action can be taken against you by the National Medical Council or the State Medical Council. So what are these misconduct? The first of them is violation of the rules. That means if he or she commits any violation of these regulations, this is a misconduct. So these rules that are written, if you do not follow the rules, this is misconduct, and you can be held liable, and disciplinary action can be taken against you. And as I said right at the beginning, that saying that I did not know the rules, or I did not know I have to do that, is not an excuse. Ignorance of the law is no excuse. Next slide, please. So prescription is a legal paper. In fact, it is the largest single type of legal paper anywhere in the world. It's the single largest legal paper because, as the Minister of State stated in the Rajya Sabha a couple of years ago, that there are 11 lakh registered allopathic doctors. And I gave these numbers in my last talk. Even if 8.5 of them are actually active, writing 10 prescriptions a day, working 250 days a year, a simple arithmetical calculation shows that per year, 212 crore prescriptions are generated. This is a single type of legal document. No transfer of property, no will, no any other legal document constitutes to the simply volume of this single type of legal paper that we generate. Next slide, please. So it is valid for medical legal purpose, and please do not write not valid for medical legal purpose, because it is meaningless. Just by writing not valid for medical legal purpose doesn't bind the judge or the court from not taking it into account. It does. It is a valid statement. So do not fool yourself by simply writing not valid for medical legal purpose and thinking that it is not valid for medical legal purpose. It is valid for medical legal purpose. So writing this is meaningless. Next slide, please. So regarding prescription, we'll talk about 3 particular headings: who can prescribe, what can be prescribed, and how to prescribe. So how would include not only the law on prescription, but also the art of prescription. Next slide, please. Who can prescribe? Of course, for our purposes, it is the registered medical practitioner. And as I said in my last lecture, a registered medical practitioner is one who has recognized qualification, that is recognized by the State Medical Council and the National Medical Council, recognized qualification, and is registered either with the State Medical Council or with the National Medical Council. So he or she is a registered medical practitioner, and he or she can prescribe. Next slide, please. So what can be prescribed? Next slide, please. So the first thing that we need to know is that there can be no cross-packing. And the very famous Poonam Verma versus Ashwin Patel case in 1996, the Supreme Court clearly said that cross-packing is not allowed. For example, we being allopathic practitioners, or actually the current, the technical word is practicing the modern system of medicine and surgery. We call it allopathy. So here we can only write proprietary allopathic medicines. Of course, we can write, across the over-the-counter medication. No problem with that. Anybody can write OTCs, but we can only write allopathic medicines. We cannot write proprietary Ayurvedic medicines or homeopathic medicines or biologics and things like that, because they would constitute to be cross-pathy, and that would be misconduct as per the Supreme Court judgment. Similarly, what about cross-speciality? So now things are evolving. Where can a medical specialist, for example, write a cardiology medicine? That depends actually. So what constitutes the line where you cross over to a speciality? And when you cross, for example, can I not write, me being a cardiologist, can I not write a diabetic medicine? Me being a cardiologist, can I not write a kidney medicine? Of course I can. So there is this fuzzy line between where we cross over from one speciality to another speciality. So as long as we have the requisite qualification, as long as we have the requisite knowledge, and as long as we are actively, keeping our knowledge up into that particular field, we can cross over to a large extent into another cross speciality. But if it becomes really, for example, I do not know much about, for example, hematology. So, for example, it would be misconduct on my part to write a medicine in, say, hematology, say, for example, in, say, aplastic anemia. So, next slide, please. So, how to prescribe is the most important thing. Next slide, please. And the ethics guidelines, as I said, in 2002, the ethics guidelines has a format which is given in Appendix 3. But this format is not for prescription. This format is for keeping of medical records. That is what the doctor should, what the hospital should, keep on their front sheet. So all these things are what should be kept in the medical record. Medical prescription format is not given in the medical ethics guidelines. Next slide, please. But the Medical Council of India in January 2015, by this particular letter, issued a format by which a prescription has to be written or suggested that this is the format that the prescription should take. Next slide, please. So here's the format, and we clearly see that, of course, the top part where the doctor's name, his designation, his qualification is given. Then the registration number has to be written in all prescriptions. In fact, in all documents that is issued by the doctor, the registration number should be mentioned very clearly, whether it's a certificate, prescription, discharge summary, discharge advice, everything. Next is what is called the full contact, etc. of the doctor, the name of the patient, date of the prescription, address. Here address has a star mark, and if you look below, it says it's basically a secondary identification. For example, it not actually be the address. It could be, for example, the mobile number, the email ID of that patient. So anything that uniquely identifies the patient. Because Ram Kumar could be so many Ram Kumars. Or Rohit Gupta, there could be 3 or 4 Rohit Guptas. So which Rohit Gupta are you talking about? I'm talking about this Rohit Gupta who has this particular email, or has this particular address, or has this particular phone number. So something additional has to be written. This is not optional. Ignorance of the law is no excuse. This is not optional. This is mandatory, because this is the format that has been given, and you can't say that I didn't know about it, so I didn't write it. You are supposed to write it, because if one Bimla Devi's prescription is shown as another Bimla Devi's prescription, then everybody is in trouble. So of course, after that, and of course, if age and sex has to be mentioned, and if it is a pediatric patient, then weight also has to be mentioned. Then the medicines as has been written in the ethics guidelines. If you are printing out, it's absolutely okay if you are giving a printout. But if you're handwriting it, the name of the medicine has to be in capital letters. Name of the medicine has to be in capital letters, and the generic name has to be written. It is not optional. It is mandatory that generic name has to be written in every single prescription that you write. What I do is I write the generic name in bracket. So, in bracket, I write the generic name, brand name, because I'm giving a printout. It doesn't matter whether it is capital or not. But if you are giving a handwritten prescription, then it has to be preferably in capital letters. And of course, followed by the signature and all that. So that is the prescription format that was issued by the Medical Council of India in 2015. Next slide, please. And in the other lecture on telemedicine, I showed you this particular prescription, which has been prescribed by the National Medical Council. Of course, that time it was called the Board of Governors, in the telemedicine guideline, and it says more or less the same thing. So basically, again, the qualifications, the name of the doctor, doctor's contact number, the name of the patient, the address of the patient. So even here it mentions the address of the patient, and the other format is more or less the same as what we had discussed. Next slide, please. So here is the basic format of the prescription. The size of the paper has to be minimum A5, which means half of A4. So the normal standard paper that we use is A4. So half of that is A5. Anything smaller than that cannot be given as a prescription. So minimum size of the paper has to be A5. The language, you can write in any language. It does not have to be in the language of the patient, because I have been born and brought up. I am a Bengali, born and brought up in Bengal. I can understand Hindi, I can speak Hindi, but I cannot write Hindi. So I cannot write Hindi to a patient. But what about a patient who is Tamil and comes to me? I cannot write in Tamil. So any language which the doctor prefers can be written. It need not be the language of the patient. It can be the language of the doctor. But one thing is very certain: no Latin must be used. No BD, TD, SOS, PRN, all those things should not be written. And I'll tell you why. Next slide, please. So the name of the doctor, as registered with the Medical Council, his qualification, not only qualification but honors also can be written. His designation, his state or Indian Medical Council registration number, contact details of the doctor or the hospital, date of the prescription, name of the prescription, as I said, age and sex of the prescription, and weight of the prescription if it is less than 12 years, and of course address of the patient. But address can be substituted, as I said, with the mobile number or the email address of the patient, uniquely identifying that particular patient. Next slide, please. So physicians shall display, again this is from the ethics regulation, physicians shall display as suffix in their names only recognized medical degrees. So degrees that are recognized by the Medical Council can be written, but also they can also write certificates, diplomas, memberships, honors that confer professional knowledge or recognizes an exemplary qualification or achievement. For example, I have so many FESCI and so many fellowships after my name. These are perhaps not recognized medical degrees, but they are honors, they are memberships which give to me which say that I have a special professional knowledge, and they can be legally written in any as a qualification on the top. Next slide, please. So designation, the physician shall write his name and designation in full with registration particulars in the prescription head. Government doctors, where the patient load is heavy, the name of the prescribing doctor must be written below his or her signature. So just a scrolling signature is not good enough. The name has to be clearly identified, because oftentimes one is not able to identify whose signature that is. So even in a busy government hospital where you're seeing many patients, Your name has to be clearly mentioned, or you can prepare a stamp with your name and designation and your registration number, and you can stamp it in every single prescription that you write. Next slide, please. So registration number. So every physician shall display, not may display, shall display. It is a must, it is a requirement, shall display the registration number accorded to him by the State and Medical Council or Medical Council of India in his clinic. And because now we have to actually show in our clinics, we have to display in our clinics. I have on the wall a frame copy of the registration number which has been given to me by the Delhi State Medical Council. Delhi Medical Council has been given. It is there. It has to be displayed in the clinic. It is written here. It has to be displayed in the clinic, and in all his prescriptions, certificates, money receipts that are given to the patient. Every single one must contain the registration number. Next slide, please. So what is contained in the body? As I said, generic name must be written. It is not optional. It is mandatory. Preferably, the name of the medicine, the brand can be written in capital letters, has to be written. Dosage has to be mentioned. How to take it has to be mentioned. How long to take it has to be mentioned. Of course, it has to end with the prescription. Next slide, please. So regarding the generic name. So in October 2016, it was made mandatory that generic names have to be written legibly. Generic names has to be written, and the prescription must be legible or preferable in capital letters. Next slide, please. So one of the things that are missed out in a prescription is the validity of a prescription. For example, you have said next visit in 2 weeks. That generally means that the prescription is valid for 2 weeks. Generally, that's what it means, or that is what it should mean. That means the prescription is valid for 2 weeks. Supposing the patient takes that prescription to the chemist after say 3 weeks and say fill up this prescription, ideally the chemist should not fill up that prescription, because the validity of the prescription is only valid for 2 weeks, because you said follow up in 2 weeks time. But often the chemist fills up the prescription. That's the chemist's fault. The chemist has made a mistake. You have not made a mistake. So I think another thing that one must write is that what is the validity of the prescription. So you must clearly say somewhere in your prescription, or even print out, make a printout next time you print your letterhead, that the prescription is valid only till the next follow-up date mentioned in the prescription. The prescription is valid only to the next follow-up date mentioned in the prescription. Beyond that, you are making sure that the prescription is not valid. Whether the chemist gives it or not is the chemist's problem. If the chemist has filled not a valid prescription, then that's the chemist's fault. So write this thing somewhere on your prescription. Medicine also, you can write that medicine has been prescribed in the brand and the generic name has been given in brackets, so that you are fulfilling the legal requirement of writing the generic name. Next slide, please. So there are various schedules. We will not get into the various schedules. So there are classification of drugs. I'll just mention 2 of them. Next slide, please. So Schedule H. So every single prescription that we write is a Schedule H prescription. That means it can only be sold on the prescription of a registered medical practitioner only. That means not on a prescription of what this means is on a valid prescription. So if your prescription is invalid, the chemist is making a mistake by giving the prescription on an invalid prescription. So the chemist is at fault. You are not at fault. You are saved if you write that the prescription is valid till the next follow-up date. So there are many drugs in this schedule, and this is identified by certain teams under the Ministry of Health. Next slide, please. There is, of course, another schedule called the Schedule X. There are other schedules, but Schedule X is something which only certain category of doctors can write. For example, I cannot write a narcotic patch for an oncology patient. A narcotic patch for an oncology patient can only be written by an oncologist. I am a registered medical practitioner. I can write every single allopathic medicine. I cannot write Ayurvedic medicine, but even then I am restricted in writing certain types of medicines which fall under Schedule X, which needs a signature and a stamp. The pharmacist has to maintain a register. The pharmacist must retain a copy, so a duplicate prescription has to be given. It must be kept under lock and key, and of course there can be no refills till the doctor says so. So next slide, please. This is regarding dispensing. So many doctors often dispense medicine. So it is not a problem if you dispense medicine, but you must clearly mention on the prescription that you are the one who has dispensed this medicine, and what medicine has to be dispensed has to be written very clearly. There must not be any secret remedies. That means the constituents of the dispensed medicine must be clear. It must not be something that is a secret. And this is given in this 3.7.1 in the ethics guidelines. Next slide, please. So what to write? So it is improper for the physician to use an unusually large signboard. So you can have a signboard, but it has to be not very unusually large, and what that means can be interpreted. And write on it anything other than his name, his qualification obtained from university or statutory body, his title, name of specialty, registration number, and so on. The same shall be the contents of the prescription paper, as I've been saying in this particular lecture, and this is given in the ethics guidelines. What you must not do, next slide please, is print your photograph, a self-photograph, or any such matter of publicity in the letterhead or on the signboard. And it must not be construed as being self-advertisement, or it can be construed as self-advertisement and unethical conduct. So I have seen a few prescriptions in which most of the prescription first page is full up with all kinds of things, and there's a very small part in which the patient, the physician writes the medication. So that kind of practice again is should not be done. Next slide, please. So I was talking about secret remedies. So the prescribing or dispensing of a physician of secret remedies is of course again unethical and is prohibited. So every single medicine that you write must have a proprietary formula and a clear name, and it must not be prescribed in secret. For example, there must not be any secret ingredients inside the medicines that you write. That would be construed as unethical and a misconduct. Next slide. For your particular safety, I would say keep copies of all prescriptions. How you do it is up to you. You can have a carbon copy, you can photograph it, you can capture it on your mobile, you can scan it, you can have it on a computer as an EMR, but do keep a prescription copy, because as I said, patients are now, and this has happened, are selectively presenting prescription or non-presenting prescription and saying that you did not ask for a particular investigation or did not advise a certain thing. And if you claim that there has been a prescription, it is your duty. The law makes it your duty. It is, as you say, onus of proof. The onus of proof is on the doctor to produce that prescription. And from where will you produce the prescription if it is not there with you? So basically, you must find a mechanism by which keeping OPD prescriptions are for your own safety. It is not mandatory by the law, but it is for your safety that you keep a copy. And have a prescription booklet. Like many hospitals have now started, they have a little booklet. National has one, the Escorts Heart Institute has another. So in which you can keep on writing in that particular booklet, or on a A4 letterhead where you can number the prescription. You can number this as number 1, number 2, number 3. So it then becomes very clear if number 1 and number 3 is there, then where is number 2? Immediately it comes into focus that number 2 is missing. So perhaps number the prescriptions, and in all non-prescription papers, as I said, that everything that you write is by default taken to be a full prescription. So if it is not a full prescription, if it's a requisition slip, you're asking the patient to get one test done, or you get to bring some medicines, then you write on top that it's a requisition slip, that it's an investigation advice. Next slide, please. So now we've been talking about the law of prescribing, and now I'll talk a little bit about the art of prescribing. Next slide, please. So there are many medication errors. Simply in the United States, there's been so many medication errors that per year they're calculating that 45,000 deaths may have been because of medication errors, because of so many reasons. And one of the primary reasons is translation. That means, giving the wrong medicine or the wrong doses to the wrong patient is what is one of the most common cause of errors. And 25% of such errors can be prevented. And often what happens if a mistake is made, then to correct that adverse effect, another prescription is given. So this leads to something called the prescription cascade. So adverse reaction promotes, somebody has nausea vomiting, so you give another medicine for nausea vomiting. And this leads to a cascade of medication. Next slide, please. So as I said, the prescription is one of the most important communication of the human race. It's the largest single legal paper that we are producing. As I just calculated, more than 200 crores per year is a single, the prescriptions that are written only in India itself. It is so important that even ancient prescriptions started with an appeal to God. They appeal to God, the doctors appeal to God to guide their hand in writing the correct and the proper prescription. So the symbol, the RX symbol that you write, it is not R and X. It is something like an R with the X that cuts the tail of the R. So this is not RX, this is a symbol which is an appeal to God to guide the hand of the physician while writing the prescription. And this is carried down from ancient times even to the present time. Next slide, please. So this came from Horus, who was the ancient patron god in Egypt. depicted by this falcon head wearing this particular crown, and it is still today invoked the hand to guide the hand of the physician. Next slide, please. So this is in the hieroglyphs. This is written in this particular form is the eye of Horus, and now this has translated into the modern form. Next slide, please. Into the modern form that you see in every prescription. So it is basically a prayer to God, asking God to guide the hand of the physician in writing the proper prescription. Such is the importance of the prescription. Next slide, please. So whom does the prescription address? In the ancient times, because there were multiple ingredients, it was complex to prepare. So basically, the pharmacist used to make the preparation based on the prescription written by the doctor. So the doctor used to write the prescription, give it to the pharmacist. The pharmacist used to prepare the prescription. I still remember when I was small, the GP that I used to give it used to write on a little note in a little register and give it to his pharmacist who was sitting on top. And the pharmacist used to prepare it and he used to give it to us in all kinds of puriyas and then these bottles with these marks. He used to say. So the pharmacist then used to tell us. The pharmacist then used to tell us, okay, you take this puria 3 times a day, you take this liquid 3 times a day, and so on and so forth. So, in the old time, the doctor used to communicate with the pharmacist, and the pharmacist then used to communicate with the patient. Now the pharmacist is no more there. So now the doctor is communicating directly to the patient. So the Latin that was used to make it easy and accurate for the pharmacist to understand the prescription of the doctor, because it was addressed to the pharmacist and not to the doctor. But today it is addressed directly to the patient, and therefore Latin, etc., should not be used. Plain, simple language is what is to be used. Next slide, please. So in the old, it was the instruction to the pharmacist how to prepare, what label to do, and it was the pharmacist who used to instruct the patient, but not so now. Next slide, please. So certain ways by which we can avoid certain errors, and this is quite important because this is where mistakes start occurring. So do write a 0 before a point. So don't write 0.5, write 0.5. This makes it very clear that there is a point and that is not missed, is not construed as 5. Otherwise, 0.5 may be misread as 5. Similarly, write digoxin 0.125 or say clonazepam 0.25 because that before the dot, before the point, 0 must be. So avoid unnecessary decimal points. For example, do not write 5 ml instead of 5.0 ml because that 5.0 ml may be taken as 50 ml. So these are the ways by which we can avoid. Next slide, please. So avoid trailing zeros. For example, if it is 0.5, write 0.5 instead of 0.50 because then it might be construed as 50. Similarly, write ml instead of cc or centimeter because c may sometimes be construed as 0 because the way some people write c and o 0 or c or o may kabhi farak nahi padta. So basically, it might look like instead of 5 ml, it will look like 50 ml. And same thing for micrograms, like for example in thyroxine micrograms, you can either write mcg or better to write micrograms in full. So mcg or micrograms. So that clarifies that this is micrograms and not milligrams. Next slide, please. So further things to avoid, don't write RU. For example, insulin, we write RU. Don't write RU, write the words units. Because if you see, here it is 6 international units. But actually, it was in a case, this was misunderstood as 61 units and was given to the patient and the patient died. So this, if you look at the way it is written, it can very easily be misunderstood as 61 units instead of 6 international units. And therefore, it is a better idea to write 6 units rather than use the abbreviation RU. Similarly, avoid using teaspoons and tablespoons because teaspoons, tablespoons, they vary in their sizes and dimensions. So write 5 ml, 10 ml, 15 ml, whatever. And quantities in grams should be written as G or GM, say 1 or 1.5 grams or even in milligrams, so that it is very clear that it is grams and not milligrams. Next slide, please. So do write as and when needed. Write when it is to be written. For example, you can write alprazolam as needed for for insomnia, or such and such as needed for anxiety, and so on. So specific indication has to be maintained, and then also to be written how much maximum. So for example, don't take more than 2 in a day. Also maximum of 2 in a day or maximum of 4 capsules in a day has to be mentioned there. And the reason for taking it, of course, this is for anxiety, this is for insomnia, this is for constipation as and when required. Next slide, please. So warn them about their, so when possible, specify the events and the time. So do write after breakfast and after dinner, or at 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. instead of twice daily. Because twice daily could be understood in so many different ways. So it's better to specify whether it's after breakfast or dinner or at a particular time when you want to take the pills. So write the numbers and the words as you write in a bank if you're asking them to dispense a certain number. So do not use the older units like ounces, and grains and pints and so on and so on. So next slide, please. So one about the common adverse effects. What should be what can be expected? For example, if you're giving nitrofurantoin, you can say that the urine may be a little yellow color. Don't worry about it. Or when you're giving a high dose vitamin B complex for abscess ulcer, you can say the urine may become a little yellow. Don't worry about it. So warn them about the possible adverse effects. For example, when I use dapagliflozin, I always tell them that your urine will contain sugar. So don't get worried if your urine test comes positive for sugar. Don't think that the sugar is not being controlled, and do please keep your private parts clean, because we don't want sugar to be there. So give an emergency hospital contact numbers and give clear instructions. For example, when special instructions are needed, for example, when you're taking say osteophos or alendronic acid, then you can tell them that okay, you have to take it early in the morning, glass of water, don't lie down after that, and then don't take any food or water for the next 1 hour. So these particular special instructions in special cases, for example, if one is taking semaglutide, has to be taken with a sip of water, and then nothing has to be taken for the next half hour or so. So these kind of special instructions also has to be given. So eligibility is a problem, and the Institute of Medicine has brought out a paper in 2006 talking about to err is human, where they said that almost like 7,000 deaths a year were because of illegible handwriting. Courts in India have also come down on illegible handwriting by the doctors. Courts in Allahabad, I think in Madras also, they have castigated the doctor on the illegibility of the handwriting. So again, we go back to what we said, that do write the name of the medicine in capital letters, and of course, write the generic name in all your prescriptions. And the court has imposed a legal duty on us so that we write properly. Next slide, please. So here's a prescription which I find totally illegible. I cannot understand a single word that has been written here. It's a full prescription, but I can't understand it. Contrast this with my prescription. Next slide, please. This is my prescription. Clearly, you see that my name is written. There's some I code of the number is written, the name, the age, the weight of the patient. Three numbers are given, the current date, that is the date in which I'm seeing the patient, last date, last seen on, that is the last prescription when it was written, so he cannot claim that the prescription was not given, and first seen on, that is since when I'm seeing the patient. So all these three dates are actually mentioned in my prescription, blah, 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 then the complaints, the diagnosis, the treatment, and if you see in the right side in the bracket, the generic name is also mentioned, and of course the last follow-up date is also the next visit date, and the last follow-up date is mentioned. So this constitutes a very clear kind of a prescription where hopefully there should be no misinterpretation. Next slide, please. So it's a good practice to avoid distraction while writing, as Dr. Chanchal was saying, that sometimes the attendants are talking and you're writing, maybe a phone call is coming. So do not be distracted while writing, because it is a permanent record and it will be held against you if you make a mistake. So do not make any changes or cross-outs. Never loan your prescription pad to anyone else, because they can write something and it will be construed that you have written it. Next slide, please. So before I conclude, the prescription has to be, of course, rational. It has to be legible. It has to be complete. It has to be communicated well. And of course, if we do all this, then we will be saving lives. Next slide, please. So just before I end, this is the old symbol of the medical profession, the staff of Asclepius, where there is a single serpent that is twined around a staff. Why a serpent? Of course, we revere serpents in our mythology, but even in Greek mythology, serpents were considered sacred. The reason is that and like medicine, their venom, if used in small quantities, was supposed to do good, but if it's used in large quantities, would do harm. Same thing for physicians. If you use the correct medicine in correct quantities, we do good, but if we use the wrong medicine in the wrong quantities, we do harm. So this old symbol of the staff of Asclepius has been now transformed into what is called the caduceus. This is called the caduceus, which is the staff of Hermes, a character in Greek mythology, which is like Narayan in our mythology. Next slide, please. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Tushar Roy, for such a wonderful presentation. and trying to finish in time and giving so much information. I think even one sentence I missed, I felt that I'm missing something important. We may have to revisit you on Facebook again and again to grasp everything. That was wonderful. Only 2 points I just want to ask. That number one is when you say write contents. So sometimes you're writing multivitamin or the things with many contents. There are many antioxidants are available, especially after COVID, and each one of us are writing because patients say they are weak and this and that. So how do we handle that? Number one. Number two, when you said you can have a booklet, so when you have a booklet, then you don't need to have a photocopy with you. The booklet can have just this two questions before we start chat.
Absolutely. So I totally agree with you. Like, for example, if I'm writing a multivitamin, they have got even 16 ingredients. It's not possible for me to write all this. So what I do is I write bracket multivitamin, multimineral. So that's what I do. I do not know whether it's the correct thing to do, but of course it's impossible for me to now sit and write, all those 16 ingredients there. It's not possible. Similarly, for example, calcium tablets often contain some magnesium, some phosphorus, some vitamin D. So it's silly for me to now, write calcium plus magnesium. So I write calcium, etc. Because the main ingredient is calcium, and then I write etc. So basically indicating that is a calcium preparation. So that's how I kind of write my prescription. I do not know whether it's the right way to do it or wrong way to do it. But I agree with you that when there are multiple ingredients, how can we write all the ingredients? I think we should write the main ingredients and keep the other ingredients as etc. or write a generic form like multivitamin. Regarding the booklet question, I agree with you that either the patient will totally make the disappear the booklet and saying that you never gave me the booklet. That is one way. But otherwise, if they produce the booklet, of course, it's absolutely they cannot selectively present. They can non-present, but they cannot selectively present prescriptions as they often have a tendency.
And as you mentioned last time, we have to keep these records for 3 years.
Yeah, basically, yeah. So there is this law of limitation or limitation act as it is called, which limits the time period within which you can bring action for a harm that has been caused to you. Supposing somebody has crashed my car or banged into my car, I cannot lay a claim after 5 years. There is a time limit by which I have to lay the claim. If I do not lay the claim by that time, then I cannot lay the claim. That claim will not be accepted by the court. It can be if I can say that I was somehow I was indisposed or whatever, and the court accepts that. It's called laches. But by and large, there's a period of limitation, and the period of limitation to bring action against the doctor is 3 years. So minimum period that one should keep is the minimum period of 3 years because that's the limitation. Beyond that, generally the courts will not allow them to file a complaint, or the council will not allow them to file a complaint against the doctor.
Wonderful. With this, I hand over mic to our Honorary Secretary, Dr. G.S. Grewal, to carry on question answer session.
Thank you, Dr. Chanchal. Well, Dr. Tushar, that was music. That was not a lecture, that was music. And there is an element of pride and pleasure in the life of a doctor to write a prescription. I remember when we became graduates, तो एक हमने prescription कागज उठा के, I must have signed at least around 50 times on that paper. यार डॉक्टर बन गए, अब तो लिखेंगे, मजे में लिखेंगे. I don't think we should steal that pleasure away from writing a prescription. So my input is that please keep enjoying writing your prescriptions. And if you want to enjoy, you must own your prescription. It's like मैं अगर किसी से बात कर रहा हूं and I'm not audible, I'm not understandable, then nobody is going to listen to you. So it's important for all of us to understand that a prescription is not a prescription, but it is putting your thoughts on paper and is a tool of communication. So the clearer you are in your communication, the more strength the relationship has. So the prescription is the tool of your strength of your relationship with your patient. So please treat it very carefully. And there are so many legal issues that Dr. Tushar has raised. Dr. Tushar, there's one question whether DOR, I don't know what DOR means. DOR, legal for discharge patient.
No, it is not. DOR means discharge or risk bond, DORB, or discharge against medical advice. This has got no legal standing at all. In fact, the courts have very clearly said that either you discharge the patient or you don't discharge the patient. There's nothing in between. So if you have agreed to discharge the patient, you have discharged the patient. So there's nothing called discharge on risk. I've been telling National Heart also that do away with this concept of discharge on request. There is nothing called discharge on request. There is either the patient has gone against medical advice, so LAMA, DAMA, whatever, or you have discharged the patient. So discharge on risk, thinking that it will absolve you of the risk, it does not. It is, if you have discharged the patient, you have discharged the patient.
And Dr. Kiran Vinayak is asking, how long do we have to keep duplicate prescriptions?
As has been said, for about 3 years, because there is an Act of Limitation or Limitation Act, which says that any complaint can be brought against the doctor for a period of up to 3 years. So if something has happened, if something the patient is not happy with, he can bring action, he can complain to the medical council for up to 3 years. Beyond 3 years, generally the council or the courts will not accept that complaint.
One clarification before I invite Dr. Arora. You mentioned that writing not for medico-legal purpose does not stand ground anywhere. Now, that is not for a medical certificate or even a prescription. Even if you write not for medical legal purposes, it is going to be used.
Yes, let us be very clear, because you writing not for medical legal purposes does not convey any duty on the part of the judge or the president of the council to accept what you say.
Accept.
So they are going to, because a document, if you go by, I did not go into the legal definition of document, but a document is something which the courts are going to accept. They are saying, is this proof of what you've written? Yeah. So if you write, it's not valid for, it is meaningless, because it is valid for medical legal purposes, and they are going to take it on board. There are only one exception where they don't, and that is when the lawyer writes in a thing that they write a particular word when they are in kind of an informal discussion is going on between lawyers. They exchange letters by using a particular word I'm forgetting. So without prejudice. So sometimes they address it without prejudice, which means that it's like an interim communication. So that without prejudice is written in a legal paper, where there is a conversation going on between two lawyers, and that may not be accepted by the court. But you writing not valid for medical legal purposes is totally
no value.
No value.
Yes, Dr. Arora, please, your question, please.
My question, I am very much thankful, indebted from Dr. Y. Hello.
Yes, please go ahead.
Is there any law for limit of patients to be examined by a government doctor in a limited time to justify himself as well as the patient?
You are opening a Pandora's box.
You see, there is no such limitation. But the problem is, if you do not see the patient properly,
that's a different.
If you do not give a proper prescription, the court is not going to ask you that you have 30 patients to see.
You will not be absolved.
They will say you did not do well for this patient, so you are punished. They don't care that I have 30 patients waiting, that I have to go home. They don't care about all these things. This patient you did wrong, and therefore you will be punished.
You will be punished.
Limit is till you fall faint.
Now there is too much pressure, political as well as from the patient side.
No, that's a different issue, doctor. No, that's a different. That does not come in prescription writing. It's an administrative.
But very tough to handle that things.
So that's a different issue altogether. I think what is important is you also mentioned, Dr. Tushar Roy, that one thing very interesting, in fact, I found was that I will take the step from you that at the end of your prescription, if you've written for 10 days, it is worthwhile writing prescription not valid after so and so date. I think that's a very good tip, and we should take it, because then the liability of continuing that medication comes on the chemist and not on you.
Totally right. So that when you next print your prescription paper, you can write this prescription is valid till the next follow-up date mentioned on the thing. So you don't have to write it every time. It's there on the bottom.
Very important. These are in coming time. These are going to be very important. So if there are, let me tell you, it's very difficult to say no to close relation for certain medicines. So how to cope with that? Don't treat your relatives, Dr. Kiran Naik. That's a rule. पैसा भी नहीं देंगे और उल्टा फंसाएंगे भी.
I think he's mentioned about sometimes the patient is critical at your home and terminal stage of malignancy and something like that, and then they ask painkiller kuch likh dijiye, something like that. So probably that time we should again go to the oncologist and get it written rather than writing narcotics too. Probably that is what he meant, because in such situation sometimes you are visiting a very sick relative and then they expect you to.
On humanity. Dr. Tushar, very often we get a call of a patient who's expired at home and you are called to certify कि डॉक्टर साहब एक बार आके उनको certify कर दीजिए, and on a prescription you write that I declare the person dead. Are you liable for any mishap that comes up later on, or what is your legal standing at that time to give a certificate of prescription at that time?
Yes, you are absolutely liable for anything that comes, because see, whenever you visit somebody, you are and you are certifying death. You are certifying two things in death. Number one is that he is dead, that this is the time he died, and this is the cause of death. So you're basically three things. So this, he has died, you can write. The time of death also you can write. Regarding the cause of death, if you have been following up the patient, if you are absolutely sure about the cause of death, if you're sure that there's been no hanky-panky in the death, then of course you can even give the cause of the death, no problem, and there will be no liability. But this is where the problem comes. If you're not sure about the death or the cause of the death, if the follow-up is not under you, then better not to write the cause of the death and just write that the patient has died and leave it alone, because and go away from the situation, because otherwise you will be surrounded by people if you don't do that. But if you don't write the cause of the death, then that becomes a kind of an invalid death certificate, and then they are going to come back to you, and then you are in safe territory. You are at your clinic.
No, I think that's an important input. That you see, the situation comes where you have not seen the patient in your life, and somebody comes and says, "Doctor, come and give it." So the advice what you're giving is, don't mention cause of death. Just say that I'm seeing him now and I declare him dead. That's it.
That's it.
That's it.
But you can use your prescription to do that?
Yes. That's important.
Yes, you can do, because the patient is dead and the patient has died at such a time. So there is no problem. There's no any, it's not a misinformation. This is a correct statement.
That's important. So
but then another question, that sometimes the medical certificate, though we have separate medical certificate at clinic, but sometimes when they want you to write on this prescription itself, or certain people write on the prescription itself, is it valid giving a medical leave certificate or writing on that?
Yes, and we'll be talking about in communication and records. So basically, yes. So now the thing is that there is the medical certificate format that has been issued. So we must stick to the format that has been issued. Also, you must maintain a register of all the medical certificates that you issue.
Very important.
You must keep a copy of all the medical certificates that you issue, and maintain a register of all the certificates. And there's a format. So this is yes, but it can be done on your prescription head. There's no problem. But the thing is that the format has to be followed. The certificate has to number serially, and the serial number has to be maintained in the register. And you must keep a copy of the register the certificate that you issue.
Dr. Tushar, two questions, one from Manju Gupta and one from Dr. Renu Wahi. Renu Wahi says, is prescription sent on WhatsApp after video consultation with the patient okay? And Dr. Manju is asking, if a patient is dead before we saw him, how can we mention the time of death?
Yeah. So the prescription given by WhatsApp is absolutely valid. In fact, the telemedicine guidelines say that it does not have to be a formal prescription. E-prescription is also a valid prescription, because you know absolutely sure that if you send it from an email, this is the email that sent it. In fact, these are also accepted in courts of law now, electronic communication. So WhatsApp, you know exactly from where it has been sent. So that's a very valid this thing. And secondly, if you're not sure about the time of the death, don't write the time of the death.
Don't write.
Just don't write the time of the death. I mean, nobody can force you. But how to get out sometimes from critical situation, you surrounded by 20 people, that can sometimes be a little bit of a problem. So there.
And Dr. Kartikeya is asking, what is the
one
maximum?
Point here. Can we write the time of our writing underneath that?
Yeah, you must mention that.
Yes, you must mention the date and the time in which you are giving. Yes.
And what is the maximum leave duration a doctor can write on a prescription?
Okay. So that is, so there is no definite rule against this. The answer to the question, as in all legal question, is reasonable. So reasonable, for example, it depends on what you have. So for example, if you have a bypass surgery, it is reasonable to take 4 weeks off. If you have, for example, fever, it's reasonable to take 3 or 4 days off. So
no, but there's no legal upper limit.
No. So for example, if you have a fracture and you know that is going to take maybe 3 years to heal, 3 months to heal, then you can get 3 months. So it depends upon what is reasonable for the diagnosis that you mentioned.
So don't get caught.
Dr. Tushar, they don't.
And you can always extend it. For example, you can do it for a certain period of time and then extend it and then extend it. That makes more sense than doing it all at one time.
Because they don't allow only for 15 days in most of the hospitals. They don't allow for more than 2 weeks, 15 days rather.
So I think we've had a lovely presentation, and before we close, let me inform everybody that the IMA South Delhi Branch is studying a case where one of the doctors went to High Court and got relief for his clinic for not paying commercial charges for the electricity. We are sending a letter today to the branch that if anybody's clinic is in a non-commercial area, लेकिन उनको बिजली के charges commercial है, we want you to share your electricity bill with us, because we plan to file a case in the High Court to get relief for all the members of our branch that they need not pay commercial rates. So you will be receiving an email through your formal email address. So Dr. Tushar, once again, thank you very much. Dr. Kirti is not here, so I take the honorable duty of extending a formal vote of thanks. And next week, Dr. Chanchal, the topic is going to be on consent. Now, Dr. Tushar, my request will be that normal thought process is consent is only for surgeries. So it will be very interesting to see how you translate consent into a practicing physician's clinic. I think that will be a very interesting part of your presentation. And thank you once again, Dr. Tushar, you have raised the issue of non-academic issues which are very, very important for practice of a physician. In fact, when we talk about security, it's not just security of the threat of violence, but security is also going to be guaranteed by you yourself when you practice by law. So that is why these issues are important, that once you follow them, you will be creating a safe environment of practice. So I think, thank you, Deepika, thank you, Jagsonpal, for supporting us. It is a very convenient thing to just wake up in the morning and click your panel email and not go through to making the entire presentation yourself. So a big thank you to Jagsonpal for supporting us. And in coming weeks, I'm sure we are going to be getting more support from Jagsonpal. We are going to be announcing our annual convention, and we'll look forward for a big support from Jagsonpal. Dr. Kartikeya, actually a lot of patients take teleconsult and ask for leave and then use it for deferment of court dates. Dr. Tushar, this is a particular issue that and an important issue, I think, that Dr. Kartikeya has written. Actually, a lot of patients take a teleconsult and ask for leave and then use it for defamation of court dates. Well, that's a malified way of doing it, but you can't do anything. Chor to chor hai. What do you say?
Yes, sir. No. Basically, you have to be safe from your side. It doesn't matter what the patient is using it for. So if you feel leave is required, you give leave. If you feel leave is not required, don't give. Because at the end of the day, you will be questioned as to why you gave leave for this particular diagnosis.
So you got to be honest. Yes, you got to take responsibility. Anyway, thank you so much, Deepika, and thank you so much, Dr. Chanchal and all the attendees. It's very encouraging to see more than 60 people joining at 8:30, and this just shows the interest in the topics that we are presenting to you. We are here for feedback for any topics that you would like to be discussing. And in coming weeks, we'll continue with our Sunday morning talk show with the IMA South Delhi Branch members. Thank you, Deepika, once again.
Thank you very much. And I just let you all know you can ask your friends to register on the same Zoom ID for the next session also. So the same Zoom ID will work, same link to register for the next session.
Thank you. Thank you.